ahead of his final full day in office, Barack Obama using his executive power one last time and drawing attention to an important chapter in the history of these past 8 years, the outgoing U.S. president commuting the sentence of Chelsea Manning. Manning, who back in 2010 fed troves of classified documents to WikiLeaks. Senior Republicans denounced the U.S. Army private as a traitor who endangered the lives of operatives and undermined national security. For supporters, he's one of several high-profile whistleblowers whose cases expose injustice in a nation that recklessly decided to invade Iraq. When he entered office, Obama had a mandate to withdraw from Iraq and draw down in Afghanistan, which he did on day one. He also signed an order to shut down the extrajudicial prison at Guantanamo. That, to his regret, did not happen, nor would he show leniency for Edward Snowden, whose Moscow exile has just been extended. A United States that was tired of war would, during these past 8 years, mostly stay silent when it learned of ever-increasing drone strikes, with anger abroad an acceptable price to pay for fewer boots on the ground. What will Obama's legacy be on security and on surveillance? Today in the France 24 debate, Pardon My Whistleblower. With us, Zachary Miller, who is producing and directing the upcoming film Countermeasures, Unveiling the Global Surveillance State. Thanks for being with us.
Sure, thank you.
Journalist Paul Moreira, who's been to Iraq and Syria on several occasions. His most recent documentary, you can still see it if you have Arte, the Franco-German channel, on catch-up. Syria, the Confiscated Revolution. Thanks for being with us.
You're welcome.
We're joined as well from Belgrade by human rights attorney Renata Avila. Thanks for being with us here in the France 24 debate again. The France 24 debate, where you can join the conversation on Facebook and Twitter, the hashtag F24debate. It was 2010, one of WikiLeaks' biggest data dumps, troves of files and video that showed most notably how U.S. forces mistakenly killed Iraqi journalists in Baghdad back in 2007. Very quickly, a culprit would be found. Bradley Manning, who in prison would change gender and become Chelsea Manning. Emerald Maxwell has the story.
After spending 7 years in prison, Chelsea Manning will be freed. The former military analyst responsible for the biggest intelligence breach in US history saw her 35-year sentence commuted by Barack Obama on Tuesday. She's now set to be released on May 17th. A transgender woman formerly known as Bradley Manning, Chelsea Manning leaked over 700,000 classified documents and diplomatic cables while working for the US Army in 2010. These included details of prisoner abuse, confidential information, and a video showing a US helicopter indiscriminately firing at civilians, killing 2 Reuters staff. Manning was charged with treason and espionage and was sentenced to 35 years, the longest punishment ever imposed for a leak conviction in the US. On Tuesday, Julian Assange tweeted his thanks to those who had campaigned for Manning, but made no mention of whether he now plans to surrender. Earlier this month, Wikileaks, the organization which published the diplomatic cables, said Assange would agree to US extradition if Obama grants Manning clemency. Manning was among 209 people who saw their sentence commuted by Barack Obama on Tuesday, but his clemency didn't extend to Edward Snowden, the former intelligence contractor who has leaked thousands of confidential security documents to the press since 2013, nonetheless thanked Obama for Manning's commutation from Russia, where he has been living as a fugitive. The White House has said that Snowden's disclosures were far more serious and dangerous, and that unlike Manning, Snowden hasn't acknowledged his crimes before a court, nor submitted the necessary documents for clemency.
And we're pleased to be joined by another guest who is with us. Kyle Orton is in Wirral in England, a research fellow at the Henry Jackson Society. Thank you for being with us here on France 24. Kyle, I'm going to read you reactions from Capitol Hill. House Speaker Paul Ryan stating that President Obama now leaves in place a dangerous precedent that those who compromise our national security won't be held accountable for their crimes, while John McCain, the head of the Armed Services Committee in the Senate, saying it is a sad and perhaps fitting commentary on President Obama's failed national security policies that he would commute the sentence of an individual that has endangered the lives of American troops, diplomats, and intelligence sources. Now, it wasn't a pardon. It's commuting a sentence. He's been in prison for 7 years so far. Kyle Orton, your thoughts on President Obama's deeds?
It seems McCain and Paul Ryan are about right. It just sends a very bad message. It would be bad enough at any time to be giving lenient sentences to people who hand classified information to hostile foreign intelligence services. But at this moment, when Russia is so brazen as to interfere in an election in the US, it's just a really, really bad timing and a really bad message.
Renata Avila, do you agree?
I completely disagree. I think that the opposite will send a wrong message, given the times that we are living in. We celebrated, even if not as happily, because for the human rights community and activists for freedom of information and access and right to truth, what we consider this case completely invalid, completely wrong. It is recognized by international human rights standards that the revelation of gross human rights violations, like the revelations exposed by Chelsea Manning, it is an obligation. It's a right to do so, and no one should be persecuted or prosecuted because of exercising that right. On the contrary, depriving the victims and their families from the truth of how the relatives were killed, how they suffered, and who is to blame for that, it is an act of torture in itself. So I think, on the contrary, I think that what President Obama did was to correct a gross mistake and to basically save a life of someone who was at risk, given the terrible conditions in the prisons of US. Yes.
There's two different issues, obviously. There's his conviction and there's the way he's been treated in prison. Those are two separate things. But again, Zachary Miller, I'm going to read to you what John McCain said, which is that he endangered the lives of American troops, diplomats, and intelligence sources.
Well, first, that has never been proven. I'd like to see some evidence for that. Aside from that fact, the fact that he has served 7 years, any judge in the country can give a sentence that they feel that they deem correct. In this case, President Obama commuted the sentence, which limited to the 7 years that he has served already. So that is quite enough. And in fact, our country owes a debt to whistleblowers, and we should distinguish between whistleblowers and people who truly commit treason.
People who do truly commit treason. Again, Kyle Orton, is this an act of treason? And
it comes very close. I mean, there's no doubt really now that WikiLeaks is a front for Russian intelligence, and Manning handed to them more than 500,000 classified documents. At this point about whistleblowing is completely to miss the point. I mean, a whistleblower tries to minimize the damage they do and tries to expose specific limited wrongdoing after trying to complain up the chain of command about it. Manning didn't do any of that. Manning leaked these documents to WikiLeaks after having only acquired them for several months. And he just dumped the documents out there. He'd never read them. He didn't know what was in them. I mean, even if you wanted to give him credit for exposing some kind of wrongdoing, he didn't know he was doing that when he did it. So it's not whistleblowing. It's an act of gross irresponsibility bordering on treason.
Paul Moreira.
I was actually, as a journalist, I had the chance to be inside the Iraq war logs scoop. I could film when they made it public in London. I was with Julian Assange, and I don't know, something is so obvious that he was Bradley Manning was exposing wrongdoing. I mean, actually, you see those pictures of an helicopter, an Apache helicopter, opening fire on civilians. I interviewed one of the soldiers that came to try to help, American soldiers that came to try to help the civilians that were inside the bus. They were children. They were refused access to an American hospital. The soldier was so shocked by the order, by his hierarchy, that he became a peace warrior after that. I mean, if it's not exposing wrongdoing, that's showing a war crime like that, and then I would like to ask a question, which is a moral question. What is the criminal crime? Is there any kind of judicial procedure engaged against the guys who open fire on civilians and journalists? I know that Manning was in jail, but what happened to them? Do we even know their names?
Renata Vila?
Well, I would like to say that for me, as Pablo Picasso painted that painting of Guernica, for me, the video Collateral Murder that Chelsea Manning revealed is the Guernica of our times. It is this image. You don't even need to go deep into the details of the Iraq War and the false evidence that led to it, the Iraq War. By just seeing the video, by just seeing how mechanical the preventing the life of someone outside U.S. soil has become, it makes you realize that who is in reality endanger American people. It is the people revealing this wrongdoing, so the people engaging actively in killing innocent, executing extrajudicially innocent people.
All right, but I want to pick up on something that was said by Kyle Orton, because it is important. The way in which these troves of documents were dumped. There were intelligence officers who had their covers blown by WikiLeaks, and Paul Moreira back in 2010. Of course, that was something that we only started to become aware of. Times have changed since when it comes to these big data dumps. They're not done the same way.
No, they're not. But frankly, I took really close scrutiny of what happened after the publication of the Iraq war logs. And I don't remember any name or any concrete case of anybody that was exposed or endangered or killed or maimed because of the exposure of the cables. Really, I've read, not most of them because there were so many, but I've read a lot of them. It was very technical. There were no names of translators. Translators are really the ones who are in danger. And I can give you a list of translators that we have forgotten and not taken care of, and are in Afghanistan or in Iraq now and are known by the insurgency and they are in danger. I may be wrong, but so far no name has been given of any victim due to the publication of the war logs.
Kyle Orton, the charge being there that from several of the panelists that the dangers or the recklessness, as some call it, of the way these documents were dumped has been overblown.
Yeah, I think that's very silly. I can give you one name, which is Agor Ashin. He was an Ethiopian journalist who had actually been working with the US to try to avoid a crackdown by that autocratic government on the press. And he had to flee his country when his name was revealed in the documents saying he'd had contact with the US embassy. Morgan Tsvangirai, the leader of the Zimbabwean opposition, was investigated for treachery after these leaks because he'd been in contact with the US as well. Two generals in Zimbabwe were court-martialed because they'd had contact with the US diplomats and they'd criticized senior officials in the government. China had a wide-ranging crackdown against academics. I don't have their names to hand, but there were a great number of them, and they widened it to include basically all oppositionists, especially Tibetans and the Muslim Uyghurs. I mean, these things went on. Syrian human rights activists were the same. This was an extremely dangerous thing to do and extremely irresponsible. And it just, that should be admitted up front. You can say it did all these other good things if you like, but it was an act of recklessness by somebody who didn't know what he was doing, was not acting in the best interests as the panelists would like him to have been. It was for own personal selfish reasons, and a lot of other people paid the price for it.
That is incredible. To say that it was for his own personal selfish reasons, that I think is silly. Now, the fact is that he exposed wrongdoing by our troops on some occasions where people did not have to flee, but they were killed. He exposed killing of journalists, of individuals who were innocent. Now, why aren't you so upset about those things that happened than you are about somebody having to flee to another country because their name was exposed? See, now these are the things that bother me. We're talking about, today, Ryan was talking about the fact that this is...
Paul Ryan, the Speaker.
Paul Ryan, the Speaker of the House. He wasn't so upset about this former Speaker who got a very lenient sentence for sexual child abuse. You know, I mean, we got to get our ideas in order here. What are our priorities? These are people who are being killed. This is a person who exposed that. he should be applauded for having brought out to the information. Now, the one thing you talk about, chain of command, there is no chain of command. That's the whole problem. With a whistleblower has something to convey to authorities, they don't listen to him. I've interviewed Thomas Drake. I've interviewed Snowden's attorney. These people went through all kinds of situations in order to try and put information out there to the authorities. They were ignored. That's the fact. Maybe we need a whistleblowing system that works. But until it works, though, the only opportunity they have is to go to the journalists, to go to the media.
Snowden sent one email before he leaked the data, and it was on a silly administrative matter. It was not about anything to do with wrongdoing at the NSA. Just FYI.
Renata Vila.
Yes, I have an important point to make, and it is everyone says everyone puts all the responsibility in Chelsea Manning. In fact, this database, with all this very sensitive information, as they claim, was available for up to 1 million people with clearance. And if information is shared already with 1 million people, and if these people are entering the embassies, entering the embassies of the United States, probably the most surveilled place, without any caution. Of course, the intelligence of the states already with this leading by the example, this incredible and scary architecture of surveillance led by the United States and the NSA and its allies, it makes practically impossible to do activism or to even be an informant in these times. One should consider that it is public, that it was available to so many people. Tell me, Chelsea was the only person to disclose these crimes on the public interest. I don't know if any of these million people with access to these documents disclose it for a private gain. That we will never know.
But again, if we go back to, of course, every time you disclose hundreds of thousands of documents, there's always a risk. But if we go back to the benefits that could have brought about in terms of in terms of morals, in terms of politics, we know something like the Frago order, which is something that was discovered inside the documents, allowed the massive use of torture by Shia militias that were within the Ministry of Interior in Iraq. That is something, that is a policy that really helped develop the ethnic strife, confessional strife that brought about hundreds of thousands of dead people. So you establish 100,000 of victims thanks to those documents, and it has no impact. And maybe I may say I'm not aware that 3 people had judicial trouble because of those documents that for me were Iraqi-centered mostly. But if we put that in the balance with hundreds of thousands of deaths, you can source back to elements that were in the documents, that's unbalanced.
All right, we're going to pick up on that point when we come back. Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate.